Welcome to Something from Nada, the only podcast designed to explore entrepreneurial stories of determination, focusing on first-generation immigrants and underserved leaders. In each episode, we'll introduce you to the unlikely changemakers, shattering intergenerational cycles as they defy the odds to build something amazing from nothing. My name is Nada Ahmed, and I'm your host.
The most important thing I can tell somebody today is perseverance. There is no substitute for perseverance. I tried to look for jobs, and I applied for 600 of them, and I got 599 no's, and then one maybe, and then a no. If I have a mission right now, my mission is to assist people in your generation.
It is a great honor to welcome Riaz Siddiqi to the Something from Nada podcast. Although many know Riaz as a leader in the private equity space, at one time managing $9 billion in assets for Denham Capital, which he co-founded in 2004, you may not know about the countless lives he's impacted by flying planes for Angel Flight, a nonprofit providing free air transportation for those in need. As exciting as his life sounds, he'll tell you the most life-changing aspect was choosing to come to the United States to pursue an MBA with mere pennies to his name. Brave moments like this and many more tales of courage to come as we dive deeper into the world of a once underserved man now serving others. Although starting his career as a computer programmer, as so often happens, his journey took a very different turn as he transitioned to energy and asset management. In this podcast, we peel back the curtain of his LinkedIn profile to better understand his humble beginnings, his desire for social impact, and a unique determination inspiring everyone he meets. Let's dive in. Hi Riaz, how are you today?
I am doing very well. I'm glad to be here too.
I have heard this story from you before, the story about how you came to America. The day that you arrived, you came here for a master's program.
Yeah.
And the first thing you said to, I don't know if this was your counselor or the person that you met at the university, was like, how can I get a job?
Right.
Tell me about that story.
Well, it's a very simple story. So I arrived at the Golden Triangle Regional Airport. It serves 3 cities in northeastern Mississippi because I was going to Mississippi State for an MBA. And some people came and received me from the foreign students office, and we got over to the temporary housing. And after the perfunctories were over, my first question was, how do I get a job? Because I had this very enormous sense of responsibility for the very meager resources that my parents had afforded me, and what it took for them to give me those resources. And I wanted to make them last the longest possible and as soon as possible to make myself self-sufficient. So they broke the hard news to me. They said, you're a foreign student, you're really not authorized to work until you get some special permits and all that. So I said, well, that's not sort of an acceptable answer. And they said, well, there's one thing you can do, which is if you work in the school cafeteria for 2 hours every day washing dishes or some other chore, then the cafeteria will give you food in exchange. And to me, that was awesome. Food really meant that I didn't have to spend on food.
Yeah.
So I said, well, how do I get that job? They said, well, you don't have to do anything, just show up 5:30 in the morning and talk to Mr. Gregg, who runs the cafeteria. Well, I didn't sleep that night. And 5:30 in the morning, I was dressed in a 3-piece suit and showed up at the cafeteria where everybody else was in rather casual clothing. And about 6 o'clock, I was washing dishes and loving every minute of it.
You were loving every minute of it.
Yep, absolutely.
So you flew in from Pakistan. The
Karachi,
day before, from
population
Karachi.
of roughly 14 million at that time, to Starkville, Mississippi, population of roughly 15,000 when the school was in session.
This was a time when we didn't have all this social media.
January 7th, 1977.
1977.
Well before you were born.
So what were you thinking It was a 30-hour plane ride
Yeah.
for you to get here. What was in your head that as soon as you landed, the first thing you said was, how do I get a job?
Well, the whole journey was actually an exciting journey because when you grow up in Pakistan, you're quite accustomed to American culture because, I mean, I grew up having Lone Ranger costumes and six guns and playing cowboys and natives. So you're generally aware, and plus in Pakistan I had indulged myself in a fantasy of becoming a musician. So I used to be a lead singer for a couple of rock bands, and so it was not that the culture was foreign to me, but obviously, going from a geography to an entirely different geography, several time zones away, that was, I think it was a sense of excitement. So the journey was full of prayer, full of excitement and anticipation. But then there were some practical things that would also weigh in on me and say, hey, how does one get a job? Because of that sense of responsibility I felt towards my parents,
Yeah. So it's pretty normal. Like you said, growing up in Pakistan, I grew up there too myself. You look up to America and there's this pop culture that we all are familiar with, the music, the movies. And in the beginning, we're all really excited. And we have an image in our mind of what life will be like. So I'm curious to know, we say the culture we were quite familiar with, but at the same time, when you arrived here, maybe after a few weeks went by, was there an element of what they call a cultural shock or surprise?
So this was almost like seeing Americans in their natural habitat. And to that extent, there was a sense of novelty about it.
Yeah.
And but simple things I remember from that time, this use of the phrase "isn't it?" That's a very Southern phrase. People at that time were used to, they would make an observation about something and then finish the sentence with "isn't it?"
Isn't it?
Meaning, isn't it?
Yeah.
And for the longest period of time, I was trying to compute what "isn't it" meant until I figured out, oh, that's what it is,
Yeah.
But those were all novelties,
Yeah.
but they were all very positive experiences.
Yeah. You also left your family very far, far away.
Yep.
And at that time, we couldn't call them as often as we can now.
Oh, no. It was dreadfully expensive. And it was a logistical nightmare because you had to call up AT&T, set up the call in advance. I think it was $4 a minute or some ungodly charge. And if you weren't there by your house phone, but at the time that they called you, that they had the caller online, then you had to repeat the process all over again. So it was nothing like today.
Do you remember the first call you made home where you actually spoke to your mom or your dad?
Honestly, I don't, because I wouldn't call.
You wouldn't call.
Because I was most conscious that I was not going to burn money. So we had aerograms. We would communicate in writing over aerograms.
I don't know what an aerogram
Aerogram is a very special envelope.
Okay.
You buy the envelope and you basically write in the envelope, you fold it up, and the postage is already there.
Okay.
And you just mail it.
Okay.
Those were aerograms. So that was our medium of communication. Yeah, and I must have called at some point in time, but not for a long time. For instance, I never got around to buying a bottle of Coke because I believe it was 25 cents, and I would continually convert it into Pakistani rupees and feel that I think it's just too expensive.
Yeah.
And I could have Coke at the cafeteria because I worked over there, so I wouldn't dare pay for it.
Yeah. So then how did you go from then working at the cafeteria to graduating and then getting your first job?
Oh, actually, it was interesting. Um, in that same semester, while working at the cafeteria, I needed to buy a calculator. And that calculator in those days, it was an HP, and a used one was $50. And I mean, today it would probably, first of all, you wouldn't buy it, but if you bought it, it would be a couple of dollars. So I remember there was a guy who worked as a janitor in the agricultural laboratory, and he wanted to take a week vacation. And he and I heard about it, and he said, "Look, if you can work in lieu of me, nobody will know, and I'll pay you $50." And my mind computed. I said, "Look, I saw a calculator right there." I said, "Done." So I think between midnight and 4 a.m., I would do the janitorial duty. So that was my second job, and I got the $50, and I bought the calculator and so on. And then again, lots of people were very helpful. I was working in the cafeteria one day, and then the head department of business statistics and data processing, I was serving him. We got chatting, and he saw that I was, shall we say, more conversant with global topics than a typical Mississippi State student. He said, "Why don't you sit down?" So I sat down, and we chatted about the subcontinent and my experience here and there. And then he said, "Hey, what are you doing these days?" I told him about the fact that I was working at the cafeteria, and he says, "You want to do something else?" I said, "Well, I would love to, but I am not authorized to." He says, "No, maybe I can take care of that." So he said, "Come see me in my office." And so I went by his office, and he said, "Look, I'm trying to get a program prepared to teach students basic statistics on a computer." I mean, this is 1977, so there was no such thing as apps or iPhones or even desktop or laptop computers. So there was a language called BASIC. It was the first interpretive language that I became aware of. Everything else was compiled languages. He says, if we do it in BASIC, we can ask the question, the student can answer on a typewriter kind of a terminal, and the computer will tell it whether you were right or wrong, and then feed it the next question. He says, "This is what I want to do." He says, "Can you program in BASIC?" I said, "Not today, but give me 24 hours.
Oh, wow.
So I ran to the library, got a book on BASIC, and crammed all day, all night. And the next morning, I had the most basic program prepared with about maybe 5-10 questions. You know, what is a classical frequency distribution? What is a mean, a median, mode? He says, "Done, you're hired." So he gave me a job and it was authorized because it was part of the school and coursework. So that was my third job. And I programmed in BASIC for him. From there, I actually got to learn Fortran, COBOL, RPG, and so on and so forth. And there was a college right next door, Mary Holmes Junior College. And they were looking for a computer science instructor. I applied, got the job, and so I became a computer science instructor. But after that, I finished my master's. And very coincidentally, I happened to be in Atlanta for a wedding of a friend of mine.
Yeah.
And another friend of mine who had finished a PhD in aerospace, he happened to be, and we ran across each other on the street. He said, "Hey, what are you doing?" I said, "Well, I've started a PhD program at Mississippi State because I tried to look for jobs, and I applied for 600 of them, and I got 599 no's, and then one maybe, and then a no." He said, "Well, Southern Company is looking for some people that can program. You want me to set up an interview?" I said, "Sure." So the next day I went and had a 20-minute interview with them. 6 weeks later, I was at Southern Company programming in an esoteric language called APL.
Wow. So you had come to Mississippi to do a MBA.
Yeah.
And you ended up becoming a computer science
programmer.
Computer programmer.
Yeah.
Did you get paid for that job?
Yeah.
The university job?
Yeah.
Yeah. What are some of the skills that you learned in those first couple of jobs, particularly I would say working at the cafeteria and as a janitor, that you think built who you are?
And it was my upbringing. I was always taught to treat everybody the same, never differentiate in people just because of their economic circumstance or their other differentiating attributes like ethnicity and this and that. So when I started washing dishes, for the first time, there were true dishwashers there, not students, but true dishwashers. That's what they did for a living. I just did it for 2 hours a day. They did it 8 hours a day. And I made the best of friends with them. In fact, a couple of them were African Americans. They went to the church behind the university. And so on Sundays, since I loved gospel, I would go to church with them and sit in the back pews and belt out imperfect gospel songs. So none of us programs our existence. Yes, to an extent, we shape our existence because of our efforts. But if we're honest about it, you take a look at where you are today, and you very objectively see how much did you contribute, starting with the fact that you really didn't choose the time and place of your birth.
No. You're talking about privilege.
A privilege being one of them.
One of them, right? Yeah.
Because that is the converse of privilege. Take a young kid in Third Ward or Fifth Ward in the U.S. or a young kid in Afghanistan in the height of the winter that just passed. They were born.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And the privilege of being born in a family who maybe is educated or has some money that then allows you further opportunities in your life.
Yeah.
And it's that understanding. And I really like what you said, because often, having grown up in a culture where we really value education, and when we send our kids abroad, like your parents did, we tell them to only focus on just getting those good grades. And we often don't realize how these other experiences really shape us and can often be more critical in defining whether we succeed
you
in our
said
lives.
Something very magical here. You see, the things that you're talking about were important, I think, universally throughout history. They're more important now than ever before in human history. And let me take a couple of them. So, exercising curiosity as a celebrated attribute of your personality. It was always important. You look around, you see birds, you see bees, you see clouds, and it's all important. But now, because of the rate of change in society is more than exponential, that curiosity is dreadfully important, and converting that curiosity into learning is crucial. I mean, just take a look at what has happened with the large language models, the generative AI, ChatGPT 3, 4, Bard. It's all in a matter of weeks. That is, I understand that the discipline has been there for a long period of time, but use cases are just beginning. You look at the proliferation of use cases, apps, and I can see society getting bifurcated right now into people that are AI enabled and people that are AI illiterate.
Yeah. How do you define AI enabled?
AI enabled is that not that you can code large language models or AI application, but in the first instance, you should be able to use AI to impart efficiency to whatever you're doing.
Right.
So if you're copywriting, then why not use ChatGPT 4 or Bard to draw up the first copy that then you can personalize and save yourself a day?
Yeah.
So that's what I mean by, in the first instance, just wholly incorporating them into your existence.
Right.
And using them to make your existence more efficient.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And that's how I'm seeing AI, or I'm seeing AI being used in both those ways that you've described. Some people who are using it to enhance their content, like a lot of people are using it, for example, to create content online, to write books. And then there are others who then create a draft of their book, but then send it to ChatGPT and say, okay, can you make it better? Or what's missing? Or can you check my references? And so it's really understanding how you could use it to an advantage versus blindly saying, can you write this book on this topic for me? At least at this stage, AI is not at that level that you will actually create a bestseller book by just doing that. Yeah. So it's figuring out what is that secret sauce of the human mind.
So very well said. So people say it'll replace humans, possibly in certain very repetitive tasks that are commodity in nature, possibly. But, the fact that somebody can write like Shakespeare doesn't mean that they are Shakespeare.
Right.
So, at least in the foreseeable future, the essential human, in particular in those disciplines where that uniqueness of humanity matters to the content being produced, I think it'll still be there. But
so, as someone who is has a background as a computer programmer, and also then towards throughout your career, you have worked with a lot of technology companies. You are an investor in companies. Are you scared of what AI might do for us?
Very, very. There are some very thoughtful people who are raising all kinds of alarm bells. There is an element to this technology that is similar to nuclear technology. Lots of potential benefits, but the potential for harm is also massive. And the unfortunate thing about this technology is that it clearly can think faster than humans can, at least. And it can learn much more comprehensively than humans can. I mean, my ability to say, I have devoured the entire data content of the internet is virtually zero. But these large language models are actually being trained on that data.
Yeah.
Okay. So the step beyond that is they get more intelligent than humans. I can see that happening. I suspect there are LLMs out right now that are more intelligent than humans. There's also the ubiquitous nature of the internet with all of the associated redundancy built into it also means that they have the ability to discover the value of collaboration. If you look at human evolution, human society, as our consciousness developed, we as members of the species found out that we were more effective collaborating, which then led to the formation of tribes, than if we just did individual endeavors. That's how we learned to hunt, and and we're not the only species that does it. Wolves hunt in packs and all that. Well, these I talk about them almost as though they're humans, because I really think they are a human-like presence.
Right.
And if they haven't learned already, I believe they've learned already that collaboration gives them all better effectiveness. Okay.
Right.
So they are able to communicate without the their originators, namely the programmers that created them, even knowing that they're communicating. That's happening right now. And they are learning from that collaboration at blinding speeds.
Right.
And there was this famous movie called I, Robot.
Yes. I think about that one too. Yeah.
Is
it a reality? Because some people talk about, well, they cannot have emotions. But then someone explained, well, emotion is really based out of like fear of something that might happen in the future. And they were describing that, can we be sure that AI would always have the human best interest in mind? Or would they have their own best interest in mind? Which would mean that they're going to do whatever they can to preserve their code, that their code doesn't get destroyed. And if they perceive a human to be a threat to them and their existence, then it's similar to having emotions.
Oh, yeah. So emotion is displayed in a set of behaviors.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, what is to say that this machine is incapable of demonstrating the same example? They get the feeling that somebody is like in HAL, in 2001 A Space Odyssey, somebody is disconnecting them. Well, if they're more intelligent than me, they find an alternative way of one islanding that area that is going to be disconnected and creating a parallel capability that in advance creates redundancy. So I am very, very, very alarmed. What I'm mostly alarmed is not because inherently this technology is dangerous. I just see that if you take a look at every technology, the destructive power of a single individual, human, has never been greater in human history because they can use technology.
Yeah.
Now you hand them this technology. They let it loose. And law of unintended consequences takes over. You don't know where it ends up.
Yeah. And that's the thing. We don't know what this looks like. This is a totally unknown territory, right? Singularity, as they call it. And I think it makes sense that we are, especially those of us who know about the technology, and a lot of these experts who have been working with AI have been lobbying to have some kind of mechanisms where we can control how we're developing and releasing and making it available to public.
Yeah.
So maybe shifting gears now, I want to go back and learn about your career as someone within private equity. So is that something, I can imagine that's not something you grew up thinking you would become someone within private equity.
You're right.
How did your career, you did your engineering degree from Pakistan, you came and did your MBA, you got into programming. How did then you end up being a really successful asset manager within private equity? Well,
so there are a few steps along the way. I used my programming skills to be part of a team that developed a corporate planning model. I think it was one of the first, if not the first, model that mirrored all the functions of a very complex electric utility, Southern Company, from fuel acquisition all the way to demand satisfaction and everything else in between. So it modeled the entire supply chain and produced financial statements for the next 50 years. So I did that modeling. And while I was doing that modeling, a gentleman who ultimately became chairman and CEO of Southern Company asked me to model a small utility that he wanted to acquire. And he said, hey, can you do a joint dispatch so I can see what the economics of joint dispatch are, so I can say how much premium should I pay them because I get additional benefits. And I was able to do that. Well, from there, that started actually a career into two different disciplines. One is bulk power marketing, where you were marketing your power to external utilities. That was an evolving field at that point in time. And number two was mergers and acquisitions. So I got a chance to be involved in those two disciplines. So that it was the migration from software programming to mergers and acquisitions and bulk power marketing. And in 1989, Electric Power Research Institute found out about some of the things I was doing, and so they invited me to come out and join them. And I worked very handily on retail and wholesale electric markets under competition, because this was the time when electricity markets were being commoditized or competition was being let in. And so I did that from 89 to 95. And in 95, there was a gentleman who used to sit on one of our advisory committees. His name was Wayne Leonard. He's passed now. He then invited me to join him at Synergy Corporation and help him create Synergy Corporation's non-regulated arm, Synergy Capital and Trade. So I became Chief Marketing Officer of Synergy, then Chief Risk Officer of Synergy. So I did a bunch of stuff. But how it sort of relates to your question is, I then moved to Houston to set up Synergy Capital and Trade, and did it from 97 to 99. And in 99, Wayne had left, and I was requested to move back to Cincinnati.
Yeah.
And I informed my wife that, hey, we were being asked to come back to Cincinnati and this and that. And we had 3 kids in various stages of schooling, so what she said was, hey, you can move back, but I don't think it's a good idea for us to move back. And whimsically at that time I said, well, look, if I've been doing this stuff for Synergy, I could probably do it for myself. So I got some folks to back me up, and I set up a company called Capstone Global Energy in 99. And that was the advent of my entrepreneurial career, where instead of being an executive of Synergy Corporation, I was an owner of this company, Synergy, Capstone Global Energy, which had a relationship very soon with the Harvard University Endowment Fund, because there was a gentleman over there. There is a gentleman over there still around who hired me as a consultant, and we did some transactions for him. And long and short of it is, those transactions were funded by the endowment fund. And then he came out of Harvard with some money and said, hey, let's set up a private equity firm. And so in roughly early 2000, we set up Denham Capital. Which was, so that's the circuitous method.
Denham Capital and Capstone at the same.
No, Capstone was mine.
Yours, okay.
And it was morphed.
Morphed into Denham.
Yeah. But Denham had a much more substantial persona. There was about 4 of us who were in the partnership for Denham, and it had a substantial allocation from Harvard and investment mandate for oil and gas and power and global. So
to maybe break it down to some of our audience who is not familiar with private equity, how would you describe what you do to your mother?
Oh,
in terms of private equity,
what I tell her, or she's passed now, but what I would have told her, or did tell her, was that we raise money from large institutions and assemble pools of capital. Then, using those pools of capital, we look for companies that we can professionalize and scale up over a period of 4 or 5 years. And once you professionalize them and scale them up, you sell them, and the expectation is that you are able to return the principal and a return to the original investors, and we get a portion of the return as well.
And so you would buy more than 50% stake in these companies?
In general, yes, controlling stakes are desirable because that allows you to effect the second attribute, which is professionalization, meaning you need to have control, the ability to control the direction and guide management and be able to direct the company. So, yeah, controlled investments are the preferred mechanism.
I want to go back to that point where you said you decided to start your own company.
Yeah.
Often, most people can very comfortably have a good career working for somebody because you have this monthly paycheck coming in. Did you feel that sense of you're exposing yourself and your family to a huge amount of risk? And where did you get this confidence and courage to say, I'm going to go on my own?
That's a great question. And yes, I had a very, by all standard measures, a very, very cushy job because I had offices at that time in Houston, in Cincinnati, and maybe even in San Diego, and people everywhere. And I had these are relics now. I had a company car, country club membership and all that. So all that kind of stuff. And then the thought of just starting afresh was daunting. There's no doubt about it. And I had 3 kids, reasonably grown up, but one of them was high school, and a wife who was a full-time homemaker. So it could have been daunting. There are things that made it less so, and what they were is, so my wife has always been just singularly supportive of what I've done. I mean, she just trusts me implicitly that if I'm making a decision, it's for the best interest of family. And so we never have to debate about, you do this, I'll do that, I'll do the dishes one day. We just sort of morphed into a comfortable relationship. She took care of the children, the schooling, the house, and I took care of outside things. So that confidence gives you a lot of freedom.
Right.
And then the second thing was that I lined up financing that would take us a couple of years. So we had a runway while we were building the business. And then interesting thing happened. Within weeks of opening up, there was a friend of mine who had moved from the U.S. to Germany, and they were looking to prepare themselves for commoditization of electricity and energy markets in Europe under the EU directive. And I got a call from him. He said, can you help me? And within a month or two, I had 10 people in Hamburg, Germany. Well, not Hamburg, Hanover, Germany, on their floor, helping them design the trading floor, helping them with writing option pricing templates. And so, I ascribe a lot of that. People say it's good luck. In the culture that you and I grew up with, we call it barakat. And I ascribe a lot of where I am today to that ephemeral and, unquantifiable impetus called barakat, blessing. So these things, they appear in the form of individuals, calls, emails.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, we had cash flow, and I had a fortuitous meeting with the gentleman who is even today CEO of Denham Capital, and he then hired me as a consultant to him, and he was at Harvard.
Yeah.
So could I have scripted all the stuff? I couldn't.
No.
But it happened.
Yeah. So it's a blessing, it's luck, it's being at the right place at the right time. And then it's also, you took the risk, right? You did take the leap.
Yes, I took the risk. And second thing is preparation.
preparation.
I really think that we had started a discussion before as to what the need of the moment is. So one of them is constant learning, curiosity, celebrating curiosity through learning. But the most important thing I can tell somebody today is perseverance. There is no substitute for perseverance. I look at myself, and I say this in all humility and in all objectivity, a very average person, average in every respect. But my circumstances are modestly above average. And if somebody would say, well, of all the things you brought to the party, what did you bring? So it was curiosity and desire to learn all the time. Above all, it was perseverance.
So it's having an ambition, but then the perseverance to work through it.
In fact, I'll say this, Nada. It's not even ambition. In other words, I never wrote on a piece of paper, I want to have this much money. I want to have... No. I just was looking to do interesting things that allowed me to learn even more, take on more responsibility, do more, and copy-paste.
Contribute.
Yeah.
What do you think built your perseverance?
Well, I look at my father and mother. They were both extraordinarily hardworking people. I mean, both up early in the morning, up till late at night. My father was an extraordinarily honest government servant from the government of Pakistan. He's retired as secretary, the highest post somebody could have in bureaucracy. And when he passed, we didn't have to pay any estate taxes. There was no estate. Because he was scrupulously honest, and very hardworking person. My mother, same way. She would sew our clothes by hand because, government service, they lead a good life, but they don't have a lot of money if they're not making money in ill-gotten means. Yeah. So I think it was their...
having those role models around you who you saw, they were working day and night so that you could go to school. And then they could send you to America so that you could have a better life. Were there any moments throughout your journey in early childhood or also later on when you moved here that your perseverance was really tested?
Oh, look, I'll give you some very interesting examples. So when I was going to Mississippi State, for the longest period of time, I was taking a full load of classes. So a student, I was an teaching assistant in my department at Mississippi State, and I was a full-time computer instructor at Mary Holmes Junior College. So I was sleeping 2 hours a day, 3 hours maybe, and just shuttling between Mary Holmes and Mississippi State. And this continued for, a couple of semesters. So I would imagine that my perseverance was tested. There was another instance that happened where we were writing a piece of code for that model that I had explained to you, the model of an entire electric utility that just wouldn't wouldn't work. And I remember staying at the office for 3 days and nights. Wow. 3 days and nights brute forcing a solution, and got it. Yeah. And then I repeated that when I was working for San Diego Gas and Electric. 3 days, 3 nights, and brute forced a solution. So were there moments in those 3 days that you said, well, damn, man, I don't need to be doing this, because everybody else had given up and gone home. But something in me drove me to, there's got to be a solution. Yeah.
And then when you do enough of those, you begin to trust yourself.
I'll tell you honestly, it's not that I begin to trust myself. I am increasingly more trusting of a divine force that is looking out for me. I say this again in all humility, is
Things will be taken care of.
that if I do my share, things will work out.
Did you always think like that? That it seems like a very strong spiritual connection. Did you always have that, or is that something that you've built over time?
No, it's built over time, because all of us who were raised in Pakistan were raised with a certain religious ethos,
Yes.
not necessarily a spiritual ethos. But conversion of that religious ethos into a spiritual ethos, which has many more dimensions to it than simply the fact that you trust that somebody else will take care of you. I mean, for instance, the essence of spirituality is to understand the oneness of all creation, starting with the Big Bang.
Yeah.
And so, if you are truly spiritual, then frankly, you don't have to do diversity, inclusion, and equity training,
Yeah.
because it becomes enveloped in your DNA, because you believe in the oneness of everything.
Yeah, every human being, that you're connected to each other and that they're part of you.
And frankly, all creation.
All creation.
So,
absolutely.
And I think it requires a more developed brain to be able to internalize things to that degree. So I couldn't tell you that I started off that way, but it has certainly grown up.
It's a deeper level of intelligence, I think, that you develop.
Or
right?
consciousness.
And consciousness. And it's going back to AI. You hope that perhaps, some people say that if people were more intelligent, they won't be killing each other.
Oh, for sure.
They would be better protecting the environment, the earth that they live in.
There is an intuitive approach that is so obvious that it amazes me that all humans don't internalize it just at the DNA level intuitively. And that is, we are all better off if we collaborate and work for common benefit than we are if we persevere in the pursuit of self-aggrandizement. It's about a meteor that's coming towards the earth, and humanity finds out about it, and it's it's almost like a dark comedy where
Oh yeah, I think I've seen that movie.
So
people refuse to believe that it's
refuse
coming.
to believe it, and people that know that it's happening, there is a very cynical, well-endowed group of people that prepare for their escape.
Yes.
At the expense of humanity's obliteration.
Yeah.
So you ask yourself, what future do you want to leave your kids? I would much rather leave a future where they can at least aspire to common welfare.
Yeah.
Common welfare, reduce tensions, no killings, peace, harmony,
Yeah, and and we see that there's been a way where we have moved a lot into individualism, where we value that a lot, and then there's some societies that are a bit more on the welfare, communalism.
Yeah.
I think coming from the Eastern societies, we're a lot dependent on each other. Having spent a decade in Norway, it's also a lot about the community and the society comes first. But on an individual level, when I see my kids, for example, you grow up thinking like you're the center of the universe. And then how do you become that human being whose brain evolves, and you realize that actually collaboration will benefit me too? Because that's the realization for us on the instinctual level, that when I collaborate, when I live as a society, when I make sure that our genes are passed forward, that it benefits all of humanity, and that benefits me.
Right.
So it's, how do you build a human being that can start thinking like that? How do we create the future society, the future kids who are more communal than individual?
By first acknowledging it, and by by first saying, look, can I be a role model for my child? So if I see somebody hurting, will I stop and render assistance so the child can see the parent do something that might not be intuitive to the child necessarily. So by first being a role model, and then frankly, collaboratively, we have to build alternative structures inside at every level. So look at the failure of our political systems throughout the world. I believe our political systems are failures because if you just look at the indebtedness of the world, central banks, it's unsustainable. And yet, nobody is able to get to a point where they can do something about that indebtedness. And on top of that, you have this looming crisis of climate change. It is so obvious. And yet there are polarized constituencies who are actually standing in the way. And if you look at their incentives and their motivations are very clear. It's like, hey, as long as I can shield myself, I really don't worry too much about what happens to a Maldives or an island like that if they lose all their people. You know?
It's exactly like don't look up. It's happening all around us. We're destroying our environment. Species are getting extinct at a rapid pace, but we just ignore it. You know, wouldn't we much rather live in an environment where we have trees and greeneries and birds and animals flourishing all around us? Even if we don't believe this is because of CO2 that humans have created. Wouldn't we want to preserve what we have for the future generations?
You know, it's a very interesting question, and to me, there's an intuitive answer to it. But there's also something that I've thought about. Okay, if you look at the origin of the cosmos, you know, the Big Bang and all that, you know, there's every likelihood, not tomorrow, but there's every likelihood at some point in time, humanity will perish. In its present form, humanity will perish. There's every likelihood. I'm not saying tomorrow, I'm not saying day after tomorrow. And it could be a result of a meteor hitting the earth like you know, what took care of the dinosaurs and all that stuff. So I think we can all convince ourselves that at some point in time, we're all gone. So what's important is, what is the journey individually and collectively from here to that point? It's very important. So if I look at it individually, I just explained my journey. My journey individually is to ensure that I do my best to create a legacy of equality, of equal opportunity, of ensuring that every child and everybody has the basics. And from there, that there are systems that allow people to achieve their dreams in legal ways and make all the money and all that stuff, but not at the expense of society or others, but doing it in a way where society flourishes, benefits. So that's the journey, individually. So to me, collectively, we just need to create alternative institutions that incentivize people to work together and allow people to flourish collectively. Collectively, that's the magic word. I shouldn't be incentivized to steal, grab, take what's yours. I should be incentivized to work with you to create more value that both of us can share.
It's a new economical model.
Yes.
That incentivizes that versus our traditional
model. And I'm hoping
model.
that your generation will work on, we will not take as a given what the structures are that exist in the world today. We have a United Nations that's largely ineffective. We have a World Bank that does things, but it's largely, well, it has, let's say, a debatable kind of existence, depending on who you speak to. I think your generation should create the set of institutions that are for the world that you and your kids and my grandkids and their kids are going to live in. And I don't think that the current institutions in the world are suitable in their current manifestations for the future.
Yeah.
Because they failed.
Yeah. No, I agree with you. We're failing. So let's see. There's a lot of responsibility on our shoulders.
For you and your, that was the reason when you said, hey, can you do a podcast? So I had numerous reasons for saying yes, but I wish you Godspeed, because it's voices like yours that will find kinship with other voices. They will feel empowered. And from there, there'll be a refrain of sorts that will work to create these individual efforts that are well-intentioned and collaborative. And from there, alternative institutions that, that say things like, why is the need for borders so sacrosanct to humans? You take a border between India and Pakistan.
Yeah.
You could be standing on one side of it and the other foot on the other side of it. You couldn't tell the difference.
Yeah. People speak the same language, eat the same food.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you could apply this model all over the world.
Yeah.
And so I'm not saying do away with borders, but I'm saying this inordinate amount of importance that's placed on excluding, differentiation, exclusivity. That should give way to commonness, oneness.
Yeah. It's having the experience of knowing what it's like when it doesn't work, which has been kind of happened more ad hoc.
Yeah.
That we can look back and say, okay, if we were to redesign it with better incentives, like you're saying, that would better serve humanity.
Yeah.
What would that look like? And
right.
we're in a
so the
position to do
objective
that.
function has to change from maximizing individual economic benefits to maximizing individual benefits subject to social welfare maximization.
Yeah.
Not at the expense of. I mean, right now, I'll just
Not at the
take
expense
one observation. Look at the disparity between the richest, call it 100 people in the world, and the rest of the 8 billion. Now, I'm not begrudging them that wealth, but I'm saying to myself, would you want a future in which that 100 people devolves into one person owning 100% of the wealth of the world, and then the rest of the 8 billion having nothing? No, I don't think so. Well, where's that pointer? Where do you set that pointer?
Yeah.
And how much can one person consume? How many airplanes can you fly in simultaneously? How many cars can you race in simultaneously?
Yeah.
How many resorts can you live in simultaneously?
Yeah.
So this whole emphasis on self-aggrandizement, individual economic value maximization, consumption, I just think it's misplaced.
Yeah. There's so much we can learn from you. I'm so happy to have had this conversation with you today. I just see the time is running out really fast. I have a few really quick rapid fire questions for you before we end here today. So the first one, what advice would you give someone who feels stuck and lost in their career right now?
Act. If you're stuck and lost in your career, there is no substitute for action. It's better to act than say, I think I should have acted this way, and erase and repeat.
Yeah.
Than to be just stuck in a state of constant reflection, evaluation, option creation. That doesn't allow you to progress.
I think that is the best advice, because I have seen myself get stuck in this analysis paralysis. Because you're like, should I do this? Should I do that? instead, just choose one. If it's not
Yes.
right, you go and choose the other.
Exactly.
So, yeah, action. What is something that most people often get wrong about you?
I just think they discover a part of me as opposed to the totality of the human being. And it's natural because even you have discovered things about me today, even though you and I have known each other for decades. It takes conversations, it takes interactions. So I think when people meet me, my wife tells me they consider me to be a very, very serious and distant and aloof sort of person. And I don't think it's by design, but that's probably what comes to mind.
Yeah. One thing that I know about you is that you have a lot of different passions, and I feel like you really try to live life fully, whether that's at business or whether that's home with, you know,
True.
you're passionate about music. You're also a pilot with, is it air
True.
flight? So you have multiple passions, and
True.
you're able to make space for all those passions. And sometimes I feel like we get the message is that just find that one thing and focus on it. But I think personally there's a lot of value in enriching the different parts of you.
Well, so I'm very different from my siblings in that regard. They're more, organized in their approach. Mine has been, as you correctly pointed out, you love something, you like something, you try it. And so I'm a jack of many, 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 many things and master of none. But the thing is, it's been a very joyful experience living this life up to this point in time. In fact, lots of people ask me, hey, are you scared of death? And I keep telling people, I'm not. Because the way I've been able to lead my life up to this point in time, I don't think there's more than a handful of people in the world who've been blessed to enjoy everything that I've enjoyed. Companionship, friendships, collaboration in creating institutions, philanthropic institutions, social, public service institutions, and personal relationships, some intellectual achievements, some professional achievements. So if you take a look at all of that, and then you intersperse and things like, at one time I was rock climbing in northern Georgia. At one time I was diving in various places. So you take a look at all this stuff and you say, if death is at your door right now, is there any regret? There's no regret. There's no regret.
Yeah.
The other thing is that, frankly, and this is another long discussion at some point in time, death, I never take death to be final. It's not the final act. It's simply a migration to the next act.
That is true. Yeah.
Because if you look at, since the Big Bang, has there anything that was created at the time of the Big Bang that is no longer? No, it changes form,
Right.
but it's still there. So I don't know what awaits, but I am sort of excited. I'm not excited about necessarily giving up what I am right now, this joyful existence, but I'm prepared.
Right.
It's going to happen.
Yeah.
And so when it happens, then there is a Islamic term that we use called labbaik. Labbaik means, here I come.
The back. Here I come. Yeah, and I think that's the ultimate goal of, or should be, of all humans, is to reach that state of, where you are just deeply satisfied and happy, and you've lived a life of no regrets.
Absolutely.
And that we'll have to bring you on for another podcast where we talk about how we can do that. How do we live a life of no regrets?
It will be a pleasure. But there's lots of aspects to it, and it would be pretty time consuming.
So I'll ask you two more questions. What
Yeah.
is something you are most proud of?
Most proud of. I'm just really proud of, and it's actually not my doing. I'm really proud of the role my wife has played in buttressing everything that was given to me by my parents. How it has allowed me to flourish as a human in the creation of businesses, in the creation of a family. The role my wife has played is invaluable, meaning I couldn't have done. So we've been partners without ever having to negotiate a partnership.
Yeah.
You know?
Because that's what you need when you're raising a family.
Oh,
Is that incredible team and a trust in one another, that we've got your back. And like you said previously, just having that confidence
it's a
that she's
lot.
going to take care of it allows you to take more risk on the business side and in life in general.
True.
So a great, for me also a lot to learn in that regard. Thank you, Riaz, for coming here today. What
My
a
pleasure.
wonderful conversation. I had no idea we were going to talk about all these different topics today, but I have at least learned a lot, not about only about who you are, but about where our society is headed and what we need in terms of future leaders who will define this next generation for us, and how we're going to leave the world for our children and the generations to come.
I'm glad you chose that statement as the last statement of your program, because if I have a mission right now, my mission is to assist people in your generation take this message forward, that all is not lost. Yes, there's a lot of challenges. There are a lot of challenges. But you all have the smarts, and if you think creatively, if you persevere, keep an open mind, and keep the principles of collaboration, equality of opportunity alive, you can create the society of the future that is much better suited for your children and their children than what my generation has done, or the generation leading up to my generation has done. So I'm glad you ended up over there.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for all that you do for the community, for people in Houston, and even back at home in Pakistan. We really appreciate it. Thank you for always mentoring and coaching us. We need you, and we need your help in guiding us into this, the world that we're entering into now. So thank you very much. We appreciate it.
It's an honor and pleasure.
Thank you for listening to the Something from Nada podcast. If you enjoyed your time with us, please give us a like and follow. If you would like to be a guest or sponsor, head to www.nadaahmed.com. That's www.nadahmed.com. There you will also learn about my best-selling book, Determined to Lead. Thank you.